All right, Nico, can you say, welcome to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies?
It's a happy episode. Happy babies.
Welcome back to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies. I'm Dr. Jay Warren. I'm the prenatal and pediatric chiropractor here at the Capuano Center. And this podcast is all about helping you have a proactively healthy pregnancy so you can have a safe, gentle, natural birth. And that's going to allow you to bring your baby into the world that much more gently and healthily so you can start off your family experience more powerfully than if it's full of stress and trauma and other health concerns. So if you are a fan of this show and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Wherever you listen to your podcast, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an upcoming episode. And also, if you haven't rated or reviewed the podcast and you've enjoyed it and gotten value of it, that will really help me out because that'll allow this podcast to reach more and more parents like yourself that might be missing out on this type of information and helping them along their parenting journey. So thank you in advance for that. And thank you if you already have rated and reviewed. On today's episode, I'm going to be having a conversation with Karen Strange. Now, Karen is someone that I've known of her work for many, many years. She's very well known in the neonatal resuscitation work. I haven't studied that myself, but I know her in the natural birth community as kind of the go-to resource and the go-to instructor for that. But I've recently gotten to know more about her other parts of work, which is through the APA connection, the Association of Pre- and Perinatal Psychology, and she will tell you in our conversation about how she went from being a midwife and doing this neonatal resuscitation work to learning about how to communicate with a baby and how she now integrates that with birth providers and the parents that she works with about how important that communication is because they are conscious, because they're forming memories, and how impactful it can be for you to talk with them. So it's going to be a great conversation. I'm really excited to have her here. Let me first take a message first. It's actually about the program that I have that is so congruent with what we're going to be talking about. So after that, I'll introduce Karen and we'll get right to our conversation. Hi, it's Dr. J, and I am so excited to announce to you that my new online program is now available. It's called Connecting with Baby During Pregnancy, and what it's going to do is going to teach you methods proven by the latest research in pre- and perinatal psychology and epigenetics that are going to allow you to have not only a calmer and more relaxed pregnancy and to have a gentler, more natural birth, but on the other side of things, you're going to feel more confident as a mom and you're going to be able to soothe your baby that much easier because when you're able to bond with baby and connect right now during your pregnancy, it's only going to translate on the other side to just being that much more connected and be able to have them calm and soothe. It's a really important thing. So head on over to drj.warren.com/CWB, that's Connecting with Baby, and you can learn all about it. Karen Strange is a certified professional midwife and also an American Academy of Pediatrics neonatal resuscitation program instructor. Karen's the founder of the Integrative Resuscitation of the Newborn workshop, which includes the physiology of newborn transition, evidence-based studies having to do with neonatal resuscitation, and the when, why, and how to provide neonatal resuscitation in the least traumatic way. She's known for her emphasis on the baby's experience of birth and tools for healing when things don't go as planned. Karen has done over 900 hours of debrief case interviews with birth professionals regarding resuscitation and constantly updates her material with new information. She's taught over 8,500 people worldwide, and she recently released a new webinar series as well as video clips and resources, which are all going to be available through links that I'll provide for you in the show notes, so look for those. So right now, let me switch over to my conversation with Karen. Hello, Karen. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jay. Nice to be here.
Yes, I'm excited that we got to connect because I've known you or of your work in resuscitation work for a long time, but I've gotten to know your other part of your work through my association with APA, with the pre and perinatal psychology work. So I'm really happy you've taken the time to be here today to share your insights on this for our new parents, bringing our kiddos into the world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and I'm glad we have that APA overlap.
Yes, it's a good one. It's a really good one. I learn a ton, and by meeting people like you and bringing them onto the podcast, then we get to spread it out to the moms and dads, for bringing our kids into the world. Now, with your background, I mean, you've been teaching neonatal resuscitation for a long, long time, and you're also integrating a lot of this information of pre and perinatal psychology to when you're teaching that. How did that come about? Like, how did you become interested in that?
So that's a really funny story, but I became a midwife in 1988 and started teaching neonatal resuscitation, in 1991. And one of the first things I noticed when I started teaching was how much fear there was around resuscitation. And I trained at a place that had we did a high volume number of births, and it was on the border. So I saw a lot of complications, and I also began to become aware of the amount of fear that I had at different places in birth, and also, of course, around resuscitation, which is has life and death impact. Mm-hmm. But when I moved to Dallas, Texas, I was listening to a radio show called New Dimensions, and they were interviewing Bruce Lipton and Barbara Van Dyson, and they were talking about the effects of maternal stress on the developing fetus. And that 1 hour interview basically blew my mind, because I thought I knew everything about mothers and babies and birth and health, but I did not really get that the baby was having an experience, both in utero, that they were conscious, and not just building, a body, and that the mother's emotional world is laying down the hardwiring for the mother, for the baby's brain, nervous system, and temperament. And they even quoted Dr. Tom Verney, who wrote The Secret Life of the Unborn Child, as saying, our personalities are formed more in utero than at any other time in our life. And that was like, I just couldn't believe I had never heard that. I mean, I knew it was important to be, have a calm mother, and that impacted blood pressure, which was, of course, health, and the placenta and the size of the baby, and prematurity. But I didn't really get that their entire nervous system, their brain, their personality was being formed. And that sort of began my journey. I wanted to know more. And so I think you've had Bruce Lipton on your show.
Yes.
Yeah, he's amazing, if anybody ever gets a chance to hear Bruce Lipton. But they opened up a new world to me of what was going on for the babies inside, especially babies during birth and the time after birth. And I wanted to learn more and more about my own birth, my own healing, but specifically what was going on for babies. And so that sort of started the journey. I did a workshop with Barbara Van Dyson, and that catastrophically opened my eyes to something that I was unaware of, that babies have an experience of birth that can be completely different from the mother. And from that point in, I started always including what was going on for the baby, because it's not just about the mother. It's what's going on for the baby as well. And so neonatal resuscitation is about the baby. So I needed to find tools to help babies make sense of what happened, help babies integrate their experience of birth, because there's two people having an experience, not just the mom. And that's sort of how it all started. And it's just been my own journey, my own education, and implementing that into neonatal resuscitation, as well as offering that separate from neonatal resuscitation.
Right, and you had, in some of your writings and other talks that you've given, you say like a baby makes a decision about the world, about what happens at birth. And talk more about that, because I think that's something that our listeners, kind of hearing Bruce Lipton and hearing others that I've had on, have kind of understood, okay, maybe there's something going on there, but like, what's your understanding about that, especially in such a high stress situation as a resuscitation?
So, first of all, I think what's really important to establish is that babies are conscious and aware. They're having an experience and they're laying down memory of what is going on, both in utero, at birth, and after birth. So, of course, if the mother's having a really hard time, the baby's probably having a hard time. I mean, not always necessarily, but the baby is having an experience of whatever is going on. And so depending on what goes on, they make a decision about that experience, and they basically live from that experience from that point on. But because Mother Nature is so incredibly beautiful and has a way to heal even the most traumatic experiences, if we support that, even the most traumatic birth, the most traumatic prenatal period, the most traumatic time after birth can be integrated and can be healed. And it's actually part of the normal birth sequence that has sort of shifted a little over time as we've medicalized birth. So one of the things is there's a few points that I would make. One is to always be communicating with the baby, to tell the baby what you're going to do before you do it. So how that looks like in a labor, let's just say in labor. Now, I teach a lot of out-of-hospital midwives. I teach midwives in birth centers. I teach home birth. I teach some nurses, some doctors, but primarily home birth. And but regardless of who comes to my class, my goal is for them to understand that babies are conscious and aware and they're having an experience. And just like you and I, being sentient beings, they need to be communicated with. And when you communicate with a being, it helps immensely. So to tell them what's going on, because all babies, children, and adults need to know ahead of time what's going to happen before it happens. It changes the experience. So to tell the baby, so let's just say you're going to go to the hospital, to tell the baby you're on the way to the hospital, because just the act of going to the hospital changes the hormones in the mother's body. And babies feel that. They don't know what it's about. They just feel the stress. They feel the stress of something's changing. And so in stress, and Bruce Lipton really talks about this, the body goes into protection. So all available oxygen, nutrients, and energy go to muscles and joints and hindbrain for survival, which is okay. Stress is okay for the baby. You must have stress to have a birth, right? A contraction is stress, and then you have to have the relaxation. You have both stress, contraction, relaxation, settling. You have to have both to have a baby. So one thing would be to tell the baby, or say you're going to break waters, to let the baby know you're going to break waters. If you're going to give a mother, let's say, Pitocin or Syntocinon, to augment labor, to tell the baby what's coming and what that's going to feel like, because that's really going to change the baby's own pacing, its own ability to handle and manage the contractions that are coming. Or let's say they're going to give the mother an epidural, to tell the baby that soon mother's not going to feel anything, but the mother's not going to leave the baby alone, even though she might not be feeling anything. She's going to stay in connection with the baby. Or if they're going to cut the baby out or pull the baby out or suck the baby out, to tell the baby ahead of time what's going to happen. And not only to tell the baby what's going to happen, what room they're going to be born into. And I think I saw that in the article that you have. To always tell the baby, to let them know they're going to be born, who's going to be there, what the room is going to be like. In resuscitation, I say to tell the baby that it looks like maybe they're having some difficulty and they're going to give the baby some breaths. You can be saying this inside yourself. You can be saying this outside yourself to let the baby know what you're going to do before you do it. It is so settling to the nervous system. And once you get that they are a real being having an experience, it makes it easier to do. It makes it easier to understand and act that way.
Right. I mean, and I think parents, if you're listening and you have older kids and I always talk about like the preschool experience first, it's like if you were taking your kid to preschool, like you do a lot of pre-framing, you're telling them what's going to be going on in advance and prepping them so that it's a more comfortable experience going through that. And parents who have kids like understand that. And then if you connect the dots of like, your baby's still conscious, is conscious in the womb and having that birth experience, then that everything you just beautifully explained about explaining what's going on makes perfect sense. But I think a lot of people just don't think of the babies having an experience as well as the mom, and I think that's what's so important in this message.
I think that is the key, and I guess I would just add to that babies in utero, babies at birth, and babies early after birth are undifferentiated from their environment. There is no difference. They are whatever their mother is in that moment. They are undifferentiated. And it really isn't, it takes several months and years to differentiate because they form in the mother. They are actually part of the mother's body. And I think there's sort of been this belief that the mother's just growing this thing in there. And when it comes out, we can form it, but really they are you. So if you're stressed, if life is difficult, sometimes life is difficult, the baby feels that. And so again, there are ways to help babies not form according to all that stress. And I would just like to, so two things I want to say is that we are all the story of what has happened to us up until now, from conception through birth and the present. The story of what has happened is laid down in us emotionally, psychologically, and physically. And it's in our connective tissue, it's in our fluids, it's in our bones, it's in our body. I mean, because that's how we were formed. First, you're this little egg, then fluid, and expand that. All those experiences are embedded in all those cells. So one of the things that you can do to help your baby, even if you have a stressful life, is to just periodically learn how to downregulate and slow down our own bodies, which is something I'm still learning to do myself.
Yes, we all do.
But that's why the taking a pause and grounding is so incredibly helpful. And it does not have to be a big thing. I do this in my resuscitation class because you can't really even deliver emergency skills if you're all cranked up and outside your body trying to get some skills, trying to respond to something that is a very frightening experience, a baby that's not breathing. But it could be as simple as taking a breath. Each breath downregulates the autonomic nervous system. Feeling yourself on the floor, on the chair. Typically in a stressful situation, we're sort of hovering above our body. So, maybe wiggling your butt or your feet on the floor. That also slows down or downregulates that autonomic system. To maybe talk to your baby, or if you're not pregnant, you can talk to your body about I'm just gonna take a moment here. And the way I like to incorporate that and recommend birth professionals inform parents is just throughout the day, maybe when you wake up in the morning, to take a breath and feel yourself on your bed on the body, and maybe say hello to your baby, even if you just found out you were pregnant. Maybe when you brush your teeth in the morning, to look in the mirror and say something nice to your baby. Take a breath. Feel yourself on the floor. How about those 8 glasses of water you're supposed to be drinking? How about each time you take a glass of water, you just take a moment to just drop in for a moment and feel yourself actually touching the floor. And the more times you do that, the more you create like this healthy nervous system, just like a contraction pattern. And I really want to connect that, because we think like stress is bad. Stress is not bad. Like a contraction pattern, you have the contraction, right? Peaks, and then it starts to come down. And then it builds potency. She feels the impulse, builds potency, goes into the next contraction. That gets really tight and big. And then there's the coming out. So when you periodically throughout the day, brushing your teeth, drinking water, maybe going to the bathroom, maybe getting in your car, each time just taking a breath. I really love you. I'm so looking forward to seeing you. Oh my goodness, I've got a full day. And then, your day. And then periodically drop down. That is the healthy cycling that you are hardwiring into your baby's body by taking just a moment. You don't have to take an award-winning class on meditation. It is a simple little practice that can be incorporated. And then, just like you said, Jay, to talk to your baby. Baby's inside, baby's outside, to know ahead of time what's going to happen before it happens.
Right, and the more relaxed that you are, and as you were saying, down-regulating the stress that's in your system, then what's being impressed upon the kiddo is, okay, yes, there's stress in the world, but there's a resolution to it, and that's what that feels like. So that, and what Dr. Verney talks about, and Dr. Lipton around those high stress environments, and what you're kind of talking about as well, is that personality decision imprint forming is that, okay, the world is stressful and I need to be ready for a stressful world. If their whole pregnancy environment is stressful, or if the birth itself is so traumatic because of whatever the circumstances might be, and they're not allowed to, given the space to resolve it, then they might make that decision about the world, like, all right, the world's a scary place. Yes. And like, there's the next trauma is coming my way, so I better be guarded for it.
Yes, and you sort of, each trauma builds on another. So right. I want to say something, come back to that in just a moment, but I want a word that a quote that I use in class a lot is that it's not just what you do that matters, but rather how you are on the inside. And so what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is what you're saying coherent with what the baby or the person is actually feeling? Because we're not really, like, the words are nice and how you say the words are nice, but our bodies are so much better at tracking what you really mean. Sort of like that, I really love you. Right. Or my favorite is, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Right.
We know you're not fine. You're not fine. So the question becomes, how am I on the inside? Because they're really picking that up. They're not picking up that everything is okay. So it's important to get coherent with what's going on inside with what's going outside, because that's what babies are tracking. Are you safe? Okay, you're saying those nice things, but I don't know. Now you're getting ready to stick me, or I feel your fear. So those pausing, and it's pretty easy to just take 8 seconds to take a breath, feel myself on the floor. Okay, yeah, I'm cranked up. I really need to slow down because I want to be with you. So I think that little piece is, we've always thought that, as long as I sound nice, that's all that matters.
Right.
That my fear of what's going on really is what's being conveyed. So as far as that imprinting or communication goes, the thing I want to say about the birth and the traumatic birth is embedded in the birth sequence, which there is a sequence of birth, and of course it starts right from conception to cell division, cell expansion. It goes all through development, and then that there is a sequence that occurs for birth. And for people that are not familiar with birth, for first-timers, the baby starts dropping into the pelvis, labor begins, different steps occur that build to contractions that get bigger, more intense. The baby comes out. It actually does another sequence of how it turns to be born, what happens when it comes out. And so in the normal baby, and even slight variations of normal, most babies, after a very short period of time after being born, once they start breathing, what will happen if they aren't taken away from their mother and if they aren't traumatized is they will, when they are put on their mother's body, at some point they will start to head to the food. And that is something that all mammals do. And this is not just like a nice little thing that babies do. This is a really important piece because when there's been an interruption, when there's been something traumatic, when it's been an intervention where we had to maybe get the baby out or have drugs or a separation or a resuscitation or a complication with the mom, anytime something has occurred, and it can even occur naturally, sometimes babies get stuck, sometimes they come out fast. That's a little outside of the normal sequence of birth. And so it can be a little challenging for the baby. And so the way to help the baby make repair, to integrate what happens so they don't have to take that with them, is first, as soon as the baby can go skin to skin, that's the most important first. So even if they have to be resuscitated and they are taken away, though I do teach you can resuscitate right there next to the mother with the cord intact, but let's say you don't have that done and the baby is taken away. Once the baby is stabilized, even if it's hours or days later, the safest place for the baby is on the mother's chest, skin to skin. No blankets, no clothes, skin to skin. That helps the cortisol levels in the baby's brain start to settle. Then they go from protection to growth and healing. All the action that they had to be in to save their life, all the stress hormones, the cortisol levels begin to drop when they go skin to skin. So extended amounts of skin to skin, even when you go home, to acknowledge to the baby maybe how hard that was. Just, oh my goodness, that was hard for me that I didn't get to have you right away. I'm sorry. I know how hard that was. When you talk to the baby, when you listen to the baby, you're saying to the baby, I hear you, I see you, and what you say matters to me. Mm. I actually heard that on Oprah, and it's just so true of babies. But then here's the repair, the other piece of repair. All babies will begin to head to the breast. And in this journey to the breast, what happens is it turns on the critical sensory needs of the brain. It turns on and goes through the sequences that got missed when either the baby was stuck, got pulled out, sucked out, cut out. If drugs were on board where they didn't get to feel it all, maybe they were separated. So once the baby, and you don't have to do this right away, it can be done later, it can be done months later, put the baby skin to skin where the mom's just hanging out. To remember, babies' brainwaves are about 6 to 10 times slower, so they do everything slower. So we have to slow down to the baby's pacing. And what will happen is, once babies integrate what happened, they're going to feel the next step in the sequence. And the next step in that sequence is, and you've all seen it if you have parents listening, the baby starts moving her little leggies. She starts pushing her little leggies. Babies do that on the inside. That's part of what they do to be born. They push their way out. When they do that on the outside, they are connecting the left side with the right side of the brain. They're crossing the corpus callosum. Then you're going to see babies with the lip smacking. And then they're going to start pulling their hand up. They're going to start feeling, this is part of the sequence of every single thing we do, you're going to feel the impulse first to do what comes up naturally in you. Your body's going to need to build potency to actually do it. And then they're going to start following through. That mouth licking, the lip smacking, and lifting their hand up and smelling, that starts the digestive enzymes in the intestines. Remember, they didn't have to digest food in utero. The placenta did all that. Now they're going to have to do that. And then this is probably going to bring up some of the birth. And so babies are going to, there's a very good chance they're going to start telling you what happened to them. They're going to tell you the story of what happened. And as opposed to quickly, as the way babies talk and communicate is they often cry. So before we immediately put them on the breast and say, everything's okay, you're okay, I would just say, give a little pause, you yourself take a breath, and reflect back that you hear the baby is telling you something, that you want to hear what she has to say. She's telling you maybe it was a little scary at this point in the birth. She wants you to hear her. So as opposed to putting her on the breast and saying, I don't want to hear what you have to say, please eat, let her tell you. She's talking to you. She's communicating with you. She's telling you her story. And this allows her to make sense. This allows her to be seen and heard so that she doesn't have to keep telling you the story every time she does a particular behavior. This is often how it shows up with crying or showing a particular place where she gets really frustrated. Your job is to hear what she has to say and to listen. And to meld this with what I said earlier about telling the baby, when you tell the baby what's going on, you're sort of marking that point because that was a difficult point, or things shifted, right? Going to the hospital, drugs, maybe it was really hard for you. To always communicate with the baby, to tell the baby what's going to happen. Then the journey to the breast after birth is the place where babies integrate, turn on the different systems in the brain for optimal survival, and to let babies do that over and over again. And maybe you could even mention some of what happened at the birth, so because you want to hear what they had to say. I think I repeated myself there a little bit. I hope I got the point across.
It's good that you repeated it a bunch because we need to hear it. I mean, the breast crawl is taught a lot in our classes here, how important it is.
I am so happy to hear that.
Yeah, and it's sometimes, though, really, having listened to it, it's talked more about in a kind of stimulation of natural body rhythms and for proper breastfeeding and maybe even neurological. But your element of the story about baby in that process, dissipating stress from it and telling the story is another part of it that isn't mentioned as much. So I wanted to acknowledge you for that is a whole other element of that important breast crawl that I think is even isn't mentioned as much. So thank you.
So I do have that. I have a video of this sort of the whole sequence of birth, and it talks about breast crawl because this is where natural repair occurs. Because you kind of have to think, if nature didn't have the repairs built in, we would be a pretty messed up society. But everything about birth was designed for the optimal survival of our species. So when you look at mammals in nature and you look at undisturbed birth and not trying to improve on what is in birth, what would happen if we didn't interfere with it? You will see in this breast crawl that babies are, in a sense, repatterning the interruptions that occurred at the birth, and that is why it is so critical to do. This is how you make repair. Self-attachment can be seen even with toddlers as they crawl up their mother. Often you see how children crawl up. That can be a repair for an interruption. And it's the repair is the most critical. And ruptures happen all the time, right? Misattunements, misunderstandings, miscommunications, interruptions in a sequence. Those are all ruptures. They need to be repaired. Birth has embedded in it its natural repair. So if you're interested in more, please go. It's called The Baby's Experience Birth, and tools for simple tools for healing under I think it's under the webinar page. But I go into great detail about that, and it's very funny. I imitate the baby, but it's just like, how can we support that happening?
Right.
This other level of exactly what you named earlier, Jay, that babies take from their experience and they live from that. Unless they get to integrate it, unless they get heard, unless their story about the depth of their experience gets acknowledged. So it can be done, right after birth. It can be done later. It could be done weeks later. It could be done months later. Of course, the earlier the better.
Right.
It would be my wish that all parents knew to do this. Like, if it was a hard ride for the baby, you could say, you made it.
Right.
You're out now. You're safe. It would help if she felt safe. But, those are, common, familiar words to deal with trauma. And sometimes birth is a little overwhelming for everybody. So to really acknowledge that it's over, that they made it. What a good job you did. And it was hard.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I'll make sure to, for sure to add in that link to the Baby's Experience of Birth. I'll find it on your site, which is KarenStrange.com. I want to make sure everybody knows about your site. You have tons of resources available, and I'll also include the Simple Tools for Mothers. I think that's a beautiful synopsis of things to kind of start things for parents that are interested. In our last minutes here, Karen, what's the major take home that you'd like our listeners to take from today's discussion?
I guess it would be what we started out with. I really wish that parents would get the babies are really sentient beings, conscious beings, that they have a consciousness and an awareness, that they're impacted by us, that they are laying down memory, and that the most important thing you can do is to communicate with them. And the earlier that starts, the better. I know there's sort of this belief that, it isn't until the baby, you can feel the baby that you really start getting excited, but it starts from conception, and Bruce Lipton would say, of course, before conception, but right from conception, you have a conscious being there. And I will say, even the reality is, it's not once the baby gets older that you get to do this. The earlier the experience, the deeper the imprint. The earlier you start communicating, the more that baby gets seen. The more that baby gets acknowledged. And I think it's really important to say you cannot live a stress-free life. Life is filled with stress. It's not about avoiding stress. It's about the repair. It's about taking the time to slow down, to feel safe, and to acknowledging that to the baby, that was scary. Baby's inside, baby's outside. It doesn't matter. That was scary. I was scared. Oh, I had a fight with Daddy, but I want you to know I want you to feel safe. Let me take a moment to help you feel safe. The only way she can feel safe, the baby can feel safe, is if the mother feels safe. Or, we don't have enough money to pay for our care, but I still want you to feel safe. Here, let me take a moment to feel safe. It's not about avoiding stress. It's about taking a moment to drop out of stress into safety. So babies experience that, babies feel that. Let's communicate with them. Let's take a moment to slow down and pause so that We can hardwire our nervous system to regulate, and we lay the hardwiring down for our babies to know how to settle and calm down. And that all starts in utero.
It's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Karen, for being here. Thank you for sharing all of this wisdom. It's just been a great conversation. I've learned a lot, so I appreciate you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Thank you for inviting me.
Hi, it's Dr. J again, and I want to thank you so much for listening to the podcast. It's something I really enjoy doing, and I, as a parent, learn a ton from these experts coming on and sharing their wisdom, so I hope you're getting a lot out of it too. And I want to share something else with you. I've created a guide called the 40 Ways to Connect with Your Baby During Pregnancy. It's full of simple things you can do on a day-to-day basis that will help strengthen that bond that you have with your baby. It's a free download. You can go to my website at drjwarren.com/40ways and just enter your email. I'll send it right to you. You can download it and start working on it right away. All of the research that I'm learning in the fields of epigenetics and attachment parenting is showing that the more bonded you are during your pregnancy with your baby, the better the birth is going to go and the better parenting is going to go, because you have that strong foundation, a strong connection to build upon. So go again to my website. It's drjwarren.com/40ways and get that free guide. And again, thanks for listening.